Yeah, and I guess that's one thing that I mean, people nowadays, primarily maybe not my generation, but the generation before doesn't realize is that in this era as well, pornography was illegal. You couldn't make it, you couldn't sell it, so a lot of the times, these independent films would push the boundaries on that. I mean, primarily, what was it, the Girls Behind Bar movies, right? You had a
Oh
couple
yeah,
of
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I don't know who created that. Oh, the subgenre was always around because I got a black and white 16 millimeter print I've yet to watch, Women's Prison, I think, and that's a 50s film. So it was around. It just got taken to a whole new level in the 70s when Corman went to the Philippines.
Yeah. Yeah, he did.
So
What was that? The big dollhouse he filmed down there.
yeah, I think the first one was Women in Cages. That was it wasn't Jack Hill. It was Jerry De Leon. That was the first time Pam Grier worked there. And then it was the big dollhouse and the big birdcage.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The big bird cage had some awesome set design on it. I mean, just
Oh
what they were
yeah,
able to do with I mean, just the raw elements of the jungle. But the Philippines is where you can go and get beautiful jungle landscapes for pennies on the dollar.
yeah. If you want to see a good documentary, pick up Machete Maidens.
Machete
It's a
maidens.
really good documentary in the Philippines.
I'm gonna have to check that out. Yeah, the Philippines. I mean, most of South America has had such an interesting history. Um, now you said that there was porn grinders as well. So are those are we talking like 8 millimeter 8 millimeter films
No.
in
It
like a
was just
back
a
room?
weird thing. The only one for a while on 42nd Street was the Victory. But you had these little, we used to call them storefront theaters and shoebox theaters. I mean, some of them were on the second floor. It was basically a scattered chair arrangement, a plywood partition with a 16 millimeter projector, and sometimes it would be like a feature without sound. It'd be a record player they'd set up or a tape player,
Yeah,
and just really strange little places. But then when you hit 72, when Deep Throat hit, and it's like, okay, we can actually get away with this shit, but it was still the whole gray area.
right.
Um, if you went down 8th Avenue past 42nd Street, there was a theater called the Cameo, and then there was the Capri, and originally it was the Eros 1 and 2, but one of them was a gay theater. Then the first one changed its name to the Venus, the infamous Venus that was open all the time. So that's where basically all the porn was for a while. And then when things started going to shit in the 80s, all of a sudden every other theater was showing porn. The 8 millimeter stuff was strictly in the peep shows that were all over the place there,
Yeah.
which was a whole different phenomenon. That sort of leads into how I got into this whole 42nd Street Pete character deal. When you think of it, let me take a sip of this water here.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, I'd love you to go into that. How you kind of developed your persona and got more involved in the business.
Well, I always knew sex sold, and basically, growing up in the 50s and the 60s, there was no sex education, so I was selling. I don't know if you remember 8-track tapes, the most horrible fucking invention ever was in the music industry.
Oh yeah.
I was selling bootleg 8-track tapes out of the trunk of my car, and I knew what Stag films were, and I knew what they were expensive. But the guy I was getting the tapes from, I saw a box up there, so I'm like, "Oh, what do you want for them?" And I think it was like $10 for color, $8 for black and white. So I got a couple of them. You could get your friends, say, we got these fucking movies, right? So we're watching them.
Yeah, yeah.
So then I got the bright idea, why not sell them? So I made some connections. It was like anything else. The more you buy, the cheaper it gets. I had no fucking clue what any of this shit was. I mean, I had the Linda Lovelace dog film. I had her and other stuff. I mean, I had all this, stuff that right now is probably priceless, but
Yeah.
I was selling it. So, that's how it started. And the whole persona, like I said, my whole thing was, I talk about going over there and shit. And it was always you'd hear these stories about, well, I walked past this porn store. I walked past this peep show. No, I fucking went in because I wanted to see what was going on. So I
Yeah.
admitted this shit, you know? And then when Screw came out, I think that was, early 60s. I would have never known about Screw until they made a big deal about it on the Eyewitness News. So I had to go over and buy a copy. But I was like really young. And I gave some dude, money to go and get me a copy of Screw so I could see what that was all about. So Screw was basically, your roadmap to everything fucking evil and wicked in New York City. It was great. Written by Al Goldstein, who I had the privilege of meeting, and actually he helped me a few times in getting research and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
that was the whole deal. So, it was like Sin City, and I went to see this stuff. I checked it out. I bought porn. I screwed hookers. I did the whole bit because I had the Vietnam War hanging over my head back then. I was classified 1A by the draft board, so it could be like, guess what? Your country wants you to go fucking die.
Yeah.
So I always had that hanging over my head. So that sort of figured into me. I want to get drunk. I want to get stoned. I want to get laid attitude before I die.
Yeah, yeah. You want
So
to live life.
yeah, luckily it never happened, but I spent the 70s doing all this crazy fucking shit and then got in, the VHS business when that started. But, going back to how the character was, I had a video store called Past Midnight Video up in Rockaway, New Jersey, and I had met Mike Franey through Chiller, and, we were friendly, and I admitted to him that I was copying a couple of his tapes because his wholesale was my retail, $10,
Right.
because that's the way it was. So we made a deal that I had a stash of these films laying around. I don't know, maybe a couple hundred of them. And I traded them, one film for one VHS tape, which made everybody happy. So then I asked him, I said, well, what are you doing to introduce this stuff? And he goes, oh, we got Bucky Beaver, this cartoon mascot. So I was living at Lake Apatcon at the time, and I was stoned out of my fucking mind and got this idea. I put on a trench coat, set up a camcorder, put on a fedora, put on dark glasses, smoking weed, drinking. I think I pulled a gun at one point for some reason, putting over the whole, 42nd Street's dead, but thanks to something weird, video is alive. And I did this like 10-minute rambling, whatever, and mailed it to Mike as a joke. And keyword is joke because I never expected this to go anywhere. So I get a phone call about a week later, he goes, oh, I got your tape. And I'm like, oh, he doesn't sound like he's too fucking happy about it. And he goes, oh, no, I think it's great. He goes, I want to put you on these intros. And I go, well, what do you want me to do? And he goes, I'm going to send you some, Stag Film VHS tapes. I want you to, watch them and, write liner notes for him. And I'm like, okay. So I get this stuff, and it's like, okay, I got 20 tapes, which is basically 40 hours of porn. So I try to do this the straight way. Like, I'm just going to watch this shit. And I'm like, oh, fuck, I can't do this. I mean, I've sold this shit. I've seen these films. I know what they are. Then I'm thinking, wait a minute. You're fucking going to blow something. It might be cool. So I figured first thing in the morning on fast forward, having coffee, taking notes. That worked. So I did this. And Frank Henenlotter, you know Frank Henenlotter, of course, from Basket Case.
Yeah.
He's the editor. So I send him the first batch, and he goes, okay, this is good. He goes, but stop with the disgusting crab jokes. We're trying to sell this stuff, not gross people out. Okay. So we do that, and then Mike goes, well, how are your writing skills? And honestly, at that point in time, I always wanted to write, but it was like, wasn't in the cards for me because I was always doing something else, trying to survive, hustling, whatever. So I said, okay, I guess. He goes, well, what do you want me to write? He goes, write something for the Blue Book about 42nd Street. Mm-hmm. So I came up with this thing called The Devil's Playground, and I basically hand wrote 36 pages and sent them to Frank and was waiting for the phone call to tear me into asshole because I didn't know how to type. So I get a phone call on my message machine. This is Frank, Pete. This is great. This is wonderful. This is going to go in every period, every quotation, I'm like, what? So I call up Mike and I go, I just got a thing. He goes, yeah, Frank just loves it. He's going to put it in. He goes, this is great. So it went in, and that's how the whole thing started. And, the funny part was I showed up at Chiller Theater and Gimmick. People sort of loved it, became part of the whole deal.
Yeah.
We did a second Blue Book, which was more of the same. I did basically a Devil's Playground Part 2, 12 hours on the deuce, like hanging out over there for 12 hours straight and going by a timeline of what I was doing. And got to interview Vanessa Del Rio, which was great. Never knew what to expect from that, but I got Frank gives me this whole thing, and I'm like, dude, I never interviewed anybody before, and I've heard through the grapevine that she could, get out of hand. And he goes, well, just keep the tape rolling. So I get 3 30-minute blanks. I had already met her at the video show in Atlantic City because at this point I was working for Liquidators. So I met her down there, introduced myself, set it up. So did my fucking homework, and I couldn't shut her up for 90 minutes. So now it's time to transcribe the tapes. And I call Frank and I go, I'm sending you the tapes. He goes, I don't have a tape player. I go, dude, I never did this. I don't want to fuck it up. I'll buy you a goddamn tape player. So I bought him a tape player, sent it over, and the second Blue Book came out, but it didn't really get, the kick I thought it would get. I thought it was head and shoulders above the first one, but, it's like anything else. The sequel can't beat the original.
Right.
So after that, we really had nothing to do. Then Mike Razzo from Alternative Cinema contacted me that he had picked up Nick Phillips feature films. And I'm thinking, all right, I've just done like how many hours of porn do I want to do this again? And I said, well, what do you want to do? And he goes, well, I would like you to write liner notes and do the, an on-camera, interview. So I said, all right. And he goes, well, we remade these with other girls, current girls. And I said, okay. All right, I get this shit home and I watch it and I realize I've seen these damn things over in New York before. And the thing with Nick's stuff was it was rather unique because he was one of the first guys to incorporate the fetish lingerie and the long, elbow length gloves and the hats and shit. So I'm like, all right, I can dig this. Then I look at the remake and I'm like, no fucking way. I can't fucking deal with this. So I call Mike back up and I says, look, this is the thing I said. I'm not knocking what you're doing here. I said, the old stuff, the old school shit, no problem. I can do it. I said, I hate to say it, but I can't put over the remakes. Okay, so, we make the deal. We go in. So I do it. The next thing that came up with, Nick had done 2 horror films that had never been released on DVD, Criminally Insane and Satan's Black Wedding. Mm-hmm. So I got to do them. They flew Nick out. Nick was a cool guy. We met. But the whole thing was doing audio commentary with him. I had to stick him with a fork because he really wasn't into the horror films. But we did one of his titty films and he perked right up. So it was sort of like, almost like the Lewis and Friedman thing. We did this for the money and it worked. That type of thing. So then I think we did a couple other ones. And then I said, something? My ex-wife calls me up and she goes, I was going through some shit and I found a wooden crate and I think it's yours. And I go, well, why do you say that? She goes, there's these 8mm films in them. And I go, I'll be right over. So completely forgot about this fucking thing. Pick this thing up. There's maybe 50 films in here. I'm like looking through these and I'm like, oh, fuck, the Linda Lovelace ones, the Candy Samples ones. So I call up Mike and I said, I want to have a sit down with you. And he goes, what about? I said, I want to put out 8mm stuff on DVD, but I want to put it out the right way. I said, because not knocking what anybody's doing, but they're just slapping shit out there. No backstory, no history. And I go, when you think about it, this shit's the great-great-grandfather of 16mm, VHS, Beta, laser discs, DVDs, now Blu-rays. So I said, I just want to try something. He goes, everybody talks. Nobody puts up money. I will say I threw an undisclosed amount of money on his desk, and I said, match it and we're in. So we did the first 8mm Madness DVD, which worked. And instead of, taking any of the money out, I said, let's do 2 more. So I wanted to do one with recognizable stars. So I did Superstars of the 70s Stags, and I did one with the European loops, the Eurotrash collection. Mm-hmm. So that just morphed into a whole bunch of shit that basically I was doing. I don't know if you saw the last YouTube channel, the show.
Oh, no, I saw that you had posted a video just a few days ago. I've not watched it yet.
I went over all the DVDs because people are starting to catch on to this whole thing, which I'm amazed at. I got over 30 releases out on this stuff. The loops, the features, the other things. So it's, not blowing my own horn because I don't really keep track of this shit, and I probably don't have any fucking ego on it. I don't know if anybody would argue that point because I don't think I do, but it's pretty cool. I got a bunch of this shit out there that's, available to the public that basically, nobody else has. Or nobody's done it the way I've done it, that type of thing.